Okay, so it's not a lightsaber, but I think it looks pretty cool hanging there with the rest of them. I finally got some work done on my wife's t-7 that I started a few weeks ago. The video's up for that. I'll put a link at the end. Uh, I had to do some dry brushing, some final assembly, and changing around a few things, but it's pretty much done. There's a few little touches. The stock still collapses. The front foregrip that I added folds forward and back and locks in place. So, anyways, enjoy the video. If you get any questions, post them. Have a good day. I didn't sand this real aggressively. Instead of sanding all the little scratches and stuff like that out of it from dropping it and working on it while I was trying to figure out what I was doing, I left it kind of rough, and that actually worked out well in the final paint scheme. Sanded everything down and then drilled a couple of holes to secure the piece that holds the stock in place with some nutserts. Once I had that in place, I was able to start working out from there. I use a lot of primer while I'm working on things, so if in one frame you see something's white and the next frame you see something's gray, it's probably because at some point in time I shot a coat of primer on it to check how the sanding was coming and stuff like that. Anyways, I picked a spot on the top shroud and drilled a hole in the top and then transferred the hole to the tube of the gun, the main body of the gun, and then put another nutsert in there and a thumb screw so that the shroud can be removed and put back on. That way I can get to the handle and all the other pieces. And we've got some plans for some electronics down the road, and I wanted to be able to add that, and I wanted to be able to take this thing apart if I needed to do that. So aside from that, while I was in the hardware store, I found basically body panel plugs or panel plugs or whatever. And so the original concept drawing or drawing that I saw of this from Star Wars Rebels had the little plugs in there. I basically measured out the stock and a few other places in the body of the gun. Drilled some holes that I can put these plugs in a little later on down the road. Once I was done drilling all the holes around the gun, I gave the thing a good sand with some 100 and then 220 grit paper. I wasn't real aggressive with the 220 to make sure that everything was perfectly smoothed out. So I wanted a little bit of a rough finish, and that'll make a little more sense when we get to the painting a little later on. From there, I cut the stock, the aluminum stock that I was going to use for folding foregrip. I wanted it to collapse and be up and down so that it was easier to store and easier to carry. And I couldn't figure out a way to make this out of PVC, so I ended up with this aluminum here. I cut a piece of aluminum tubing and then cut it in half. So I had a couple of different pieces to attach around the underneath of the gun on the PVC. Cut out a channel with a hole saw so that I could weld it together to make a little bracket to fit on the bottom of the gun. Sadly, I think I destroyed my camera in the middle of filming this, so there's kind of a section there where I skip around and you won't get to see this bracket made. But in the end, I got the bracket finished. I had to redo it a couple of times, and that's all on the footage that I lost when I broke my camera. So I shot a bunch of black primer, satin black primer, on the parts. I'm going to wrap them with 550 cord, and then just started taping off the different pieces of the guns. Shot everything with a base coat of a silver metallic, and then taped off the areas that I was going to shoot with a darker metallic. Quick tip when you're taping things up: put the first layer of tape on normally, and then turn the tape backwards on itself so the sticky side's actually out. Saves you a lot of trouble when it's time to untape everything. So once everything was taped up and everything was dry, I went over the entire gun with a much darker metallic looking color, and I was very inconsistent and unthorough with it. I did not want a uniform, smooth finish. I was looking for something a lot splotchier to give it a heat cycle type effect, and I actually got kind of lucky. It worked out pretty well. And once I had the parts of the gun that I wanted painted dark done, I brushed the accent stripes in the front and rear shrouds over top of the darker areas. And here's where that crappy sand job really paid off. Using a technique similar to dry brushing, where dry brushing you take the vast majority of the paint off the bristles of the brush. It's good for hitting edges and making weathering and wearing and stuff like that, but this one I left a little bit more paint on than I would normally with a dry brush technique, and over the course of about an hour of very lightly and sporadically just brushing the dark areas, I was able to get a very machined type look where the rough sanded areas that I didn't sand with the 220 held a lot of the silver paint, and so it looks kind of nicked and worn, but only very lightly so. Then I took a black wash and went over the silver areas to give them a little more of a dull finish, like they've collected a little bit of residue. Then wrapped up the rear grip and the foregrip with a 550 cord using a technique that I used to use when I was wrapping knife handles. Basically, take a piece of 550 cord, wrap it around the handle, and then pull the remaining end back underneath what you wrapped and tie it off at the base. One of the things that I didn't remember when I used this technique was it is not necessary to wrap that thing just as tight as you can, because if you do that, then when you go to pull the cord through, you can't get it through. And, well, anyways, I struggled with it for a little while, but was finally able to get the cord situated in a manner where I could tie it off the base. And I left a little bit of extra material at the end there for my wife to hang her beads and whatever she wanted to hang on there on. Sometimes I actually learn from my mistakes, so when I did the front grip, I wrapped the 550 cord a little lighter this time and was able to pull the cord through, and it actually came out much nicer. So the moral of this story is if you use this technique, you do not need to wrap it real tight. In fact, if you do, it just makes things harder on yourself. I finished wrapping the front forward grip, tied it off, and then put it on. It's adjustable so she can slide it forward or back to make it a little bit more comfortable for wherever she wants it to sit. Once I had that done, I basically stuck all the little pieces on, the plugs, the thumb screws, the shrouds, and all of the little stuff. Left a hole in the back so that the back piece can be removed where the stock collapses. And hopefully I'm going to add some electronics to that a little later on.